Hi, friends. Welcome to Whoop with Jen. I'm back in front of my mic. It's been a while. I guess we all kind of need to take a break every now and then. I felt guilty about not recording anything new, but I kind of needed to give myself that escape. So, it's been several episodes since I was going through our chronicalized story, and I'm going to pick that back up today. But before I get into the nitty gritty, I am obviously back from a very much needed vacation. Apparently, I decided to extend my vacation from the pod for a couple weeks. I've been super stressed with work. And we went back to our favorite place in Costa Rica. It is a long travel day there and back. And Elle is a champ on the road. But it occurs to me that we shouldn't have to travel so far to, feel like we're making an escape. But we live in Arizona and not near an ocean, and water for me is very healing. So I guess that's what we have to do. California's close, but it's not the same as feeling remote, and Hawaii is crazy expensive. And I love Mexico, but the water situation is really rough because Elle just does not understand that she's not allowed to have bath or pool water in her mouth. I have been there enough to know that just the ice in a drink can just scare up Montezuma's revenge like nobody's business. So, yeah, the trip is not easy, but it's worth it. As I mentioned in my last pod, from the Palapa, I'm super proud of her ability to travel. And it prompted me to write down the list of places that we've taken her. So we've taken Elle to Maui, Oahu, the Big Island, the state of Washington, California, New York, Idaho, Colorado, Florida, South Carolina, Illinois, Michigan, Costa Rica, and Jamaica. She loves to go places, and we can even find food for her that she will tolerate. So next stop is Europe. That's on my list. But back to our story and our journey. Elle is now 4.5 years old. After we fired the first geneticist, because she just wanted to, profit by putting Elle into a study, our developmental pediatrician gave us a referral to someone else. I have to admit, the technology for genetic testing did improve since Elle's original diagnosis of an inverted chromosome number 6. So I'm not going to discount the original diagnosis because technology wasn't available, but the doctor suggested something called a chromosome array. By the way, in reading through all of these doctor notes, I'm like astounded because at this time, at age 4.5, Elle had already had 3 sets of ear tubes inserted to ward off ear infections. And she also had strabismus surgery, which is surgery on her eyes for her eye muscles to keep her focused because they kind of wandered. So I've been with her at least 4 times of anesthesia and procedures and, watching them put her to sleep and waking her up, and plus the sleep study for seizures, which were inconclusive with that horrible neurologist who kept calling her retarded. And you know how I feel about the R word. And now I want to refer you all back to my most favorite and proud episode titled Dr. A-Hole and the MLY. I would love it if you would go back and give it a listen because I was so unhinged. So here we are now because some speech therapist told me that there are developmental pediatricians, which I found out the hard way with the F. But now I have one and she is ripe with referrals. And she's Indian, which I like. And she was almost at risk with her own life and her former country because of her opinions and willingness to speak them. So yeah, I liked and respected her a lot. So now I'm at St. Joseph's Hospital for this genetic evaluation. Reading through all of this paperwork, I'm reminded that my daughter did not roll over until 6 months of age. She did not sit until 9 months. She did not crawl until 12 months and finally walked at 18 months of age, which is about the time she was able to finally eat baby food. She spoke a single word at 3 years of age. and put 2 words together at age 4. She was not potty trained. She was sick a lot. She had had pneumonia a few times. I did have to take her to the emergency room for that. When their temperature gets so high, it is really scary. And then, I keep reading through these notes, and the notes are about stupid shit. Like, my husband's ancestry is Norwegian and German, and mine is English and German. I mean, for goodness sake, aren't we almost all here from some country in Europe if we end up in the United States? But they did this chromosomal microarray analysis to look further into her genetic abnormality and to get more information. Not only was this crucial for Elle to be diagnosed further and to receive the proper interventions, but it was also necessary for her to continue to receive our state-funded services, since her diagnosis was so vague. I mean, if you did not have Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, or autism, you were kind of forced into this quote-unquote other box, and it meant a lot of work and documentation to justify the need for services. And also, this autism box got added to the diagnosis forms throughout this time. Like, it wasn't there in the beginning. And it is the miracle diagnosis. And later, I am going to have a podcast about the wonderful world of autism. So the new geneticist did the chromosome array. And I still, to this day, have a binder clipped packet of information I don't know what to do with, because it is too complicated and I am neither a scientist nor a doctor. I have to admit, the results were super cool when we were presented with them. The technology had advanced so much that the lab was able to not just identify the abnormal chromosome, but to also look at the individual arms and sections within where the mutations occurred. So there's like an upper arm and a lower arm, and then they're all numbered like a ladder. So we find out that Elle does not have an inverted chromosome, number 6. She has 2 inverted chromosomes, number 3 and number 17. But there's more. My daughter has been misdiagnosed, but that doesn't mean I get answers. So she had missing data in chromosome number 17 within segment 7q11.2 to q12. I'm sure that makes total sense to you, but it's that precise. The geneticist had done some research, and some results showed up that the missing data could relate to a diagnosis called neurofibromatosis. Well, and that neurofibromatosis means that Elle could have cafe au lait spots on her body, which could turn into tumors, which are especially scary if they're on her head because they can grow inverse into the body and basically mess up her brain. And then I bet you thought I was going to say, well, fuck me. Yeah, I thought about it. But if neurofibromatosis is something you can keep an eye on, but you can't cure it. So you just have to keep an eye out to, I guess, preventatively keep your kid from dying from a tumor. The second mutated chromosome was number 3, where there was a duplication of data. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the data that went missing from 17 moved to 3. She had added data in segment 3Q12.1 to Q13.11. Did you get that? You know what that means? No, it doesn't mean anything. In fact, the geneticist did endless research to come up with the conclusion that Elle's chromosome abnormalities were very, very rare. So my huge binder-clipped packet of information includes the 2-page chromosome array report, plus just a shit ton of stuff she printed from the internet, mostly related to the 17 deletion because there was nothing much on number 3. How does a chromosome become inverted? And I have to take a pause right now because I'm recording this on a Saturday morning and my neighbors have their yard guys and the blowers are driving me fucking crazy. They're on, they're off, they're... I'm like ready to go out and throw something at them. And they just went down. Great. They heard my anger. Okay. Back to my script. How does a chromosome become inverted? How is DNA created? Well, we have sperm from men that fertilize an egg from a woman. And of course, we all know there's a ton of stuff going on in, clinics and everything so that everyone has the ability to have a baby, no matter where you come from. But when sperm fertilizes an egg, the egg starts dividing and multiplying. During this process, the egg is creating its DNA. Somehow, the egg that became L had part of DNA break off and something's attached that no one can explain. It's like a mixed up recipe, except you can't fuck up guacamole, but you can fuck up a human being. I mean, I knew my pregnancy with her was different from day one. And I think I know why. So we're going to get kind of personal, and I don't know who listens to these pods. I know my sister does. I hope my parents don't know about them, but some secrets are going to come out. I was on birth control after I had Jack, who was Elle's brother. I went off the pill in December of 2002 and had not yet had a period, which is common. And Greg and I went to a New Year's Eve party that night, and I believe I conceived a baby that night. So Happy New Year to you too. And we were staying at my parents' house that night, so that makes me just an extra little dirty girl. Hey, Mom, Dad, we're just hanging out with you. But I did lose that baby and have a miscarriage at 7 weeks. And that was the darkest time of our marriage. Greg could not share the loss in the same way that I did. And I'm sure I'm not alone out there. I mean, what man could understand what it means to have a living thing inside you and for it to disappear in a very disruptive and painful way? It was real for me. The pain, the loss of a person, and for him it was a concept. I hated his guts. I just wanted to take Jack and leave. I was deep and dark in depression and horrible thoughts. Work was absolutely torture. I had to go there and paint a happy smile on my face in this suffocating and negative workplace, supporting my staff and keeping their spirits up, but yet having to leave midday, making up an excuse and a lie to leave to go to a medical center where, they have to basically stick a wand up my vagina to confirm whether or not I have a fertilized egg with a heartbeat that wasn't there. And then go back to work like nothing had happened. So our marriage and Greg and I could have ended right then and there. His mom was really sick too then at the time. Over the course of her life, she had suffered from a lot of pneumonia and was in line for a lung transplant. Not a smoker, lungs. Her lungs were just like pneumonia just kills the tissue. And once you are just filled with scar tissue, your lungs can't absorb oxygen. And she's facing a deadline because her age, she was within the few months that her age was going to prevent her from being considered a lung transplant recipient. So to keep myself busy, I researched everything I could about lung transplants, how they harvest them from the deceased, the authorization the deceased families have to provide. Like, it's not enough to say on your driver's license you're an organ donor. You have to, your family has to know that and honor that. So they harvest the lungs, and they put them in a cooler and fly them on nicer airplanes than I will ever fly on. We're talking like Lear jets, and they also have to be within a certain radius of the recipient patient. And how they cut the patient up open to the core to be ready in case the lungs are a fit, but they have to make sure that they're a fit. And how they stitch these people back up if it isn't a good match. It's so invasive. And so Greg's mom had been on oxygen for years. Her skin was gray. And she was weak, couldn't walk from, the kitchen to the family room without coughing up some mucus. And Greg's dad was taking care of her, and that was exhausting. And there was a false call on a set of lungs during this dark time of me grieving this lost baby. And Greg, like, he's a sensitive guy. I mean, he was in fits and he cried when this whole like false set of lungs showed up, and he was like, I don't want to lose my mom on the operating table. And I'm like consoling him with like, oh honey, she doesn't die on the operating table. She'll die if the lungs don't take. I mean, isn't that nice of me? It's just my perfect way of being an ass back to him. But it's very true. I mean, lung transplants, organ transplants, it's not the operation. It's they have to take and they have to succeed, and you have to take care of them and do the right things for your body so they don't get rejected. And by the way, they don't track lung transplant recipients after 2 years. Like if you live 6 months, it's a miracle. If you live 9 months, it's a miracle. If you live 12 months, it's a miracle. If you live 2 years, they don't track it. And I'm really happy to say that my mother-in-law lived for 10 extra beautiful years, met 3 new grandkids. So be an organ donor. Anyway, as you can tell, this is a huge emotional episode for me. And so Greg's, scared that his mom's going to die. And we, of course, do what all people in their 30s do with kids is we open wine and we drink a lot. And I just cried in his arms. I didn't want to go to work the next day, and I just called in sick. And I just begged him to stay home with me too. I really, really needed him. It was such a mess. I was just grieving the loss of this baby. And so, yeah, we played hooky and we stayed home from work that day. And I'm pretty sure that's the day we conceived Elle. And that might be TMI. But, I mean, we all know where babies come from, so it's not like a surprise. But I happened to get pregnant 3 weeks after I had lost this other baby, and I had never had a period after going off of birth control. And so I do honestly wonder if it's all related, or maybe it isn't. I mean, maybe I would have had Elle in any scenario. I mean, her existence has saved me from being a greedy and selfish person. Like, I'm so much better because of her. And Greg and I are better too. I mean, we are partners. We work together. Our son is a better person, I think, because of Elle. And we have met the most amazing families and people who have been confronted with similar situations all along the way. So yeah, chromosome 6 or 17 or 3, whatever. Elle's DNA diagnosis, the misdiagnosis doesn't really mean a whole lot in the entire scheme of things. So in case you want me to summarize my learnings from this episode, I'm not really sure that I can. All I know at this point is that my daughter has genetic abnormalities that don't check a box, which is a serious frustration because all these forms require a freaking checked box. But she checks my boxes. So whoop whoop to you all out there. Thanks for listening. This is Jen.